Which is better, a trowel or a knife? I've been using a trowel my whole life, and I think it's a great tool and does a lot in the garden. A couple years ago, I got myself one of these Japanese garden knives. Heard a lot about it and wanted to give it a try. So I've been using this one mostly for the last 2 years, but I still use this one once in a while. What I'm going to do in this video is do a truthful comparison between these two tools so you know which one is right for you. I've looked online and there are a number of comparisons of these two tools, but most of them prefer this one and over-exaggerate the features. I don't think those people have used both tools side by side, and that's what we're going to do in this video. I've got 9 different comparisons to make. We're actually going to go in the garden and do some of these things so you can see exactly how these two perform. And then at the end, I'll give you my honest opinion. A trowel is a tool that has a fairly large head on it. They do come in different sizes, but this is the size I prefer. I've used them for many years, and the biggest complaint about them was the handle right here. It always bent. Now, I'm a pretty strong guy, so I had no problem bending this, and I go through one a summer. But about 10 years ago, they came out with this design. This is aluminum. And you'd think aluminum is softer than steel, but they've made this area here very thick. And the aluminum goes right up into the handle. So this is essentially an aluminum trowel with plastic coating here to make the grip a little more comfortable. Since they came out with these, I haven't broken any, at least not here. I have broken the tip off a couple, but then I just regrind a new tip on the end and they're good. These are fantastic trowels. This one here is probably 8 years old. What about a knife? What is a Japanese knife? Well, these are called Hori, and that stands for dig in Japanese. You can see the blade is narrower. It is curved a bit, but not nearly as much as the trowel. One side is sharp like a knife, and the other side is serrated more like a saw, and the tip is sharp. A good Hori is made from stainless steel like this one. The first comparison is price. Well, this tool here is about twice the price of this one. These are not inexpensive garden tools, especially if you get the stainless steel one. But there are more in the market, and the price is coming down a little bit. And I'll put a link to some of my favorite ones in the description below. What about comfort? If you're going to use these a lot in the garden, comfort is important. I prefer the trowel. You can see this is rounded and it's curved and it fits really well in your hand. There's even a place for your thumb at the top so you can get good leverage when you're digging. Garden knives tend to come with a squarish handle. There's very little rounding here and it's not really shaped for your hand. If you're going to use this for 15-20 minutes, it's not really a big deal. But I'd hate to use this all day long. For comfort, the trowel wins. The next comparison I want to do is cutting strength. I use jute for all of my tying up. If my tomatoes need to be tied to the stake, or if my perennials are drooping and I'm tying those up, I use jute. The reason for that is that jute decomposes. It's an organic material. So if bits get cut off and fall to the ground, no big deal. In a year from now, it's decomposed. I also like to use it on woody plant because if I forget this and I forget to cut it off, it won't strangle the bark because it decays in a year. Now let's see how these things cut string. Trowel is completely useless. Now sometimes I do sharpen the edges a bit, but not very much. It's really not good for cutting things. The Hori on the other hand has a nice sharp edge and can cut string nicely. That means I don't have to carry a pair of scissors with me in the garden. The next task is digging up some plants. So I had some Lavataria here. They're annuals and they grew up about this big. And they're just finished flowering, so I cut them off a couple days ago. The stumps are still here and all of the roots are in there. Let's see how well these tools dig them up. I'll go with the trowel first. Now there's mulch here, so the first thing I want to do is move the mulch away. I don't want to get mulch buried in the soil. Wasn't too bad. Now let's try the Hori. So one thing you notice is that the blade is much smaller, so it's harder to move the mulch. Because this is sharp on the edges, it cuts the roots a little better. But because it's smaller, it doesn't give you as much prying power. When you're trying to pull up something that's large, this doesn't work as well. The trowel works a little better for that. So I think for this job, it's kind of a tie. The Hori cuts roots better. The trowel gives you better leverage. The next job is to dig up a dandelion. And there's two here that are about the same size. So we'll use those two for testing. Trowel goes first. That's an unfair test. This dandelion is surrounded by rocks, so I'm going to pick a different one. This one over here. Now I tried using the same technique for both of these. The Hori has an advantage in that it goes into the soil easier and deeper. That's because it's narrow and pointed, whereas the trowel is wide and point isn't really very sharp. What that means is that you get more of the root out. And if we have a look at these two roots, this was done with the Hori, this was done with the trowel. The deeper the root is that you get out of the soil, the less likely it is that this dandelion will regrow. The Hori actually does a better job. In fact, I found with it, there's a slightly different technique that works really well with it. I now put it in the soil, and then because the sides are sharp, I give it a twist. And it cuts really easily. If I'm going through a lawn, there's a lot of dandelions, this is a much better tool. The next job is digging a hole. Now the Hori is called the dig tool, but it's actually not very good for digging. The trowel is much faster and easier. Now perhaps in really hard soil, the Hori might be better because you can get into the soil easier. But the problem with the Hori is this: it's narrow and it's not curved very much, so it doesn't hold much soil. It takes a long time to dig a little hole. The trowel, on the other hand, is much wider, so it digs in and gets a whole bunch of soil. So if I'm digging a small hole, I'd much rather use the trowel. But I can get by with a Hori if I need to. As far as digging larger holes, I wouldn't use either one of these tools. These are only good for small holes. The next test is planting. We're going to take these two plants that we just dug up and we're going to try to plant them with the two tools. Well, step one is to dig a hole, which we've done. Because the trowel digs a hole faster and it moves soil very nicely sideways because of the large blade, it's actually a much better tool for this. For digging a hole and planting things, I prefer the trowel. Another claim made for the Hori is that it's great for pruning things, cutting plants back, both herbaceous and woody. It does have a nice sharp edge, so let's see how it does. This is a peony plant. The sharp edge is almost useless. I've tried cutting all kinds of things with it. Even when I'm repotting and I want to cut something back, I try to use that edge. I find it totally useless. Now the serrated edge is a little better. But it makes a terrible mess. Quite honestly, pruners work much better than this for cutting things. I would never use a serrated edge on a woody plant. It just makes too much of a mess. And even on herbaceous plants, it's not a good idea. If you have a ragged edge after the cut, it's easier for disease to get into the plant. Use your pruners. That's what it was made for. How about the trowel? You know that the trowel is completely useless for this job as well. So neither tool works for pruning. Another claim that's made for the Hori is that it's great for planting bulbs. Well, if I'm planting larger bulbs and they have to go down 5-6 inches, I wouldn't use either one of these tools. It's far too much work. I use a shovel. I dig a hole that's a foot or more in size, take the soil out, put the bulbs in, put the soil back. No bone meal, by the way. So for large bulbs, neither tool is suitable. Now for smaller bulbs, I do plant differently. Smaller bulbs only have to go an inch or two deep, so you can use a trowel, push it in the soil, move the soil back, put the bulb in, push it back, and you're done. Both tools can do that. Again, as you've seen, for digging holes, I think the trowel is better. And if I had to choose between these two for planting small bulbs, I'd pick the trowel. The last claim I'd like to look at is that the Hori is great for dividing plants, like perennials, for instance. Now, since this doesn't have a sharp edge, it's useless for that. I have tried using this for dividing perennials. If you have a large perennial, don't bother using this. Take out the spade and just hack it apart. Much easier. But if you have a small perennial, this does work. The serrated edge cuts pretty nicely through a perennial. It doesn't do a very good job on woody roots. So for dividing smaller plants, the Hori certainly wins out. So here's a table showing the results. Which tool would I use? Well, quite honestly, I like them both. And I don't think one is better than the other. For digging and planting, the trowel is much better because it moves more soil. It's a faster way to plant things. However, for digging out weeds, I find the sharp edges here very handy. And for weeding, I think this is a better tool. If you buy good quality, either one of these will last many years. If you're only going to buy one of these and you don't have a very large garden, you might be better off with the Hori. It does a better job with cutting, and the fact that it digs slowly isn't a big issue because you have a small garden and you're not doing a lot of digging. And it's certainly better for weeds. Have you thought of using weed barrier in the garden? Do you think this stuff will keep your weeds away? Well, think again and have a look at this video right here. It'll save you money, it'll save you time, and a lot of weed frustration. Happy gardening.